Be here. Amazing.
Amazing. So, Dr. Levine, we're going to take it back to kind of your upbringings and your roots. You have a strong passion for athletics. You're playing lacrosse. You're on Long Island. I'm serious. What introduces you first to this passion for lacrosse prior to your career?
Well, first let me say thank you for having me here, because it's very much honored to share some stories with everybody here. And I guess if we go back to the early days, for me was very formative. My college years, where I had at Cornell a very strong focus on academics and athletics. I had an amazing professor who I was doing research in immunology with Virginia Utermohlen for multiple sclerosis, and at the same time taking coursework and being part of this lacrosse team. And we started as freshmen, and freshmen back in the day in the Ivy League had to play freshmen. Freshmen couldn't play on the major team, but it was great because there was about 4 of us that became a very tight band of brothers. And then sophomore year, we all kind of got up to the real team, Division I lacrosse with Cornell. We had an amazing coach. And this coach, Richie Moran, who's kind of like the John Wooden of basketball, Richie Moran lacrosse, won all the best coach awards. And 85 years, he's young right now. And also, I'm actually going to see him next weekend. Players always come back, and we have an amazing relationship with him. And that kind of speaks volumes for who he is.
Yeah.
He had our sophomore year, he started with a leadership style. He came out of the Marines. You know, leadership styles could either be command and control, almost like you're in the Marines, or you can inspire and develop trust and build trust and inspire people. And it wasn't until kind of our journey of sophomore to junior to senior year did Richie change his style, and it reflected who these players were, because we all had certain personalities, and he realized that we were better in that mode of leadership. And so our sophomore year, we lost in the quarterfinals. Our junior year, we lost in the semifinals to a team we beat pretty well, Navy, during the year. So we got to our senior year, and it was like we would not be denied. We're going to win the national championship. Long story short, the sophomores of that team and us, we were seniors, didn't lose a game for 3 straight years, those sophomores. Longest win streak in NCAA history, never going to get broken, 42 games. We were 16-0.
Wow.
We were national champs. But it set me on a path of understanding what teamwork was all about. And teamwork, what it's all about is you're making all your people around you, your teammates, the best they can be, the best versions of themselves, because if you can do that, then you become the best. So it didn't matter who scored the goals. In fact, one of the famous goals when we're playing Maryland, and Maryland was 16-0, and we were 16-0, and it was back in the day, first time Wild Roller Sports ever televised a game, most people ever for a lacrosse game, which you might laugh was about 17,000 people back then. But now they have 50, 60,000. You guys get 85,000 in Notre Dame for football every Saturday,
yeah.
so God bless. But it was quite special, because the last goal, we had this attack, a Canadian Mike French, Eamon McEnany, and myself, and as Frenchie and Eamon are going 2-on-1 on the goalie, Eamon throws it to Mike to put the ball in, and he could have easily scored.
Wow.
And it typifies the mentality and the mindset of the team. And that really propelled me in my own thinking about what does it really mean from a standpoint of leadership, but also teamwork.
Yeah.
Making each other better, the
Certainly.
best you can be, around you, not you, everyone else.
So starting out that transition, you're developing freshman year all the way to senior year. You explained the grit and the perseverance your team has, and as I understand, you guys were national champions your senior year. So if you can kind of explain the leadership you mentioned from your coach and how you've adapted that personally as you've progressed with life as well.
Yeah. So I was a science background, microbiology and bio at Cornell, and doing research. I hated hospitals because I didn't have such a great experience as saw my grandparents pass. And I thought I didn't like business. My father was in a kind of a crazy business called the fur business, and sitting around the dinner table, and maybe y'all can relate to this, but I think one of the most interesting things of growing up is what's that conversation around the dinner table? And it really helps develop our thinking. We're so influenced by our parents and the quality of the conversation. And the conversation around the table was always like some type of fighting in this crazy fur business because it wasn't organized and everybody owed each other monies and it was IOUs. And I'm saying, wow, this is business. This ain't for me. I'll leave that to my dad and my brother. I'm going the opposite direction. And so I was more science and math I liked.
Yep.
So I didn't think I liked business. But as I went on and I liked working with my hands, I thought, dentistry is going to be really interesting. And I get out of dental school and I kind of emerge at a dental school. I find myself in an industry that just was, to me, very siloed, very fragmented. But at the end of the day, as I do a look back, very, very ripe for change. Very, very ripe for innovation.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, when we go to school, higher education, our parents have much influence on the direction typically.
Yeah.
So what was your family background like going into microbiology at Cornell and then specializing in dentistry?
Yeah.
What was the influence you had to move in that direction? Do you have that influence in family?
Yeah, well, my family is a little strange background, but they're furriers and they're doctors.
Yeah.
Yeah, my Uncle Harry was a very well-known doctor down in Galveston, Texas, and he worked with Denton Cooley, and the famous heart surgeon. And so there were doctors. My cousin Mitchell's a neurosurgeon in the city, and my father was a twin. And Mitchell was his twin son. But, we had that influence. And for me, we follow a path that feels good, and we make certain decisions based on our exposure. There was no internet back there. There wasn't that much access. Cornell, for me, was just an amazing place, and I was focused on this research and doing my coursework and lacrosse. But one of the things we ended up doing about 8 years ago was we created a major minor program at Cornell because I felt like I didn't really understand what business was all about. And a buddy of mine created the scholarship so that when you were a science major, you could take business undergrad, which is Dyson School at Cornell. And the minor became so popular, the university took it over, and then we're doing other things. But we didn't have that. I didn't have that access to business courses, or I didn't take that step to go after it because I had these preconceived notions.
Yeah.
And that's the important point. You kind of want to break down those walls and go for it and be courageous and, take a course that, you don't think you're going to like, and all of a sudden you find yourself in something that's incredibly engaging and enlightening for you. So it wasn't until I got out of dental school that I realized I love business because business is a team. Business is creating this incredible culture, this, if you can do it right, you fill each other up. You can get, from a standpoint of team, athletics, music, whatever your team is doing, just the magic starts happening. I have a friend who says, you got to dream big, and when you dream big, you got to dream a little bigger. And when you love the people next to you, that's when the magic happens. When you build team and you develop these deep relationships, it doesn't matter what your business is, it's completely different. And that's a changing leadership style in corporate America today because unfortunately, we still live in a command and control corporate America. It's just the unique companies that develop this deep trust and inspiring each other. And that Stephen Covey would say in his new book, Trust and Inspire versus Command and Control. But that's where we need to move. We need to change the leadership style in this country in that direction.
So with your time in dentistry and higher education, I'm curious, what is the important role behind networking? Say, networking with colleagues who you aspire to be, the practices. I know residency is an important piece of dentistry program. What does that role play? And you have the students there, school might be stagnant inside, but how do you grow externally with the colleagues that are already in the profession?
Yeah, it's a great question. Dentistry, like medicine, depending on where you are, is very siloed. It just is. Now, from an academic standpoint, once you get out, you can specialize. So I ended up specializing. I'm a prosthodontist, which is aesthetic reconstructive dentistry, implant reconstruction. And we build all of the kind of everything of the gum up, and then you got the surgeons and the perio guys who place the implants. But just like medicine, dentistry needs this interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary disciplines need to talk to each other. And it's only the last 8 to 10 years that the business model has changed. That what has happened is the people are practicing, the specialists are practicing together under one roof. So from a clinical standpoint, what's great for the patient is that there's a business model emerging where multi-specialty practices are more the norm, and the business people are going into dentistry to help develop that.
Yeah.
And we call that the DSO business, dental service organizations, the flip side of the MSOs, what they have in medical. But, you know, for me, I was always wanted to be, you know, when I realized I love business, I was starting companies, but at the same time, I wanted also be an amazing clinician. And so I was always very focused on academics, specializing, teaching, and I gave up a day a week up until this past COVID, running a program at NYU.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just felt that I needed to have that. I didn't want to just be the business guy.
Certainly.
And so I tried to always to do both.
Amazing.
I tried.
So post-graduation, let's follow that roadmap there. Where is Dr. Levine's path lead? Do you go into a practice? Is that in New York City? Or prior to JBL New York City, your personal practice, what does that look like? Do you go into someone else's practice as a member?
Yeah. You know, we say where you start is not where you end up.
Yeah.
Right? And each step along the way of our journeys, and for all the young people, you know, what you do next, I don't want to say it's not that it's irrelevant, it's just a stepping stone. We say it's not the destination, but it's the transportation of what you learn that takes you to the next step. It's always zigzag, it's never linear, our journeys, right? So when I started, I came out, I was very influenced by complete serendipity. I met the guy who figured out how to etch porcelain, and what that means, it was this whole new industry of dentistry called adhesive dentistry and bonded ceramics and bonded veneers. I'm literally 26, and I'm one of 3 people in the country doing this technique. Talk about complete luck and serendipity. But I embraced it, I went after it, I started teaching about it, and then after 4 or 5 years of kind of the so-called restorative cosmetic dentist, I decided I needed to specialize, that I wanted to get to that next level. And painfully, because my wife was pregnant with our first child, I went back to school, and I was working 3 nights a week and Saturdays, and a full-time pros program, which is torture. And I finally got out of there, you know, weighing 160 pounds, and normally I'm about 180, and but I was like a Ferrari getting out of the garage, because when I graduated the program, the PG Pros at NYU, I opened up a practice. And but those first 4 or 5 years, I worked with a group, and it's very important, I think, in the beginning. It's like you're mentored by people, and you're learning your stuff. And I learned certain things that really helped me set up on my own in a much better pole position, much more successful position. So I do think it's so critically important to have that mentoring, especially early on, especially if you're thinking, I want to be an entrepreneur, I have a great idea, I want to start something. You know, those early years of being mentored and really learning the basics and the fundamentals is what's going to support that next move. But I got out, and I was very fortunate to get a great space where I was. I wanted to be in New York City on the Upper East Side, right off the park. And I've been there ever since. In 1990, it's a duplex, and my colleague took the first floor, I took the second. About 3 years later, I needed the whole place, and he moved with his dad. But it started.
Wow.
It started, and you know, it never turned back from that.
It's amazing. So I've had the privilege to be actually in presence of Dr. Levine's practice. It's like going to a spa. It's on 5th Avenue. It's across Central Park, and the team there is an amazing team. They have a massive team there in the practice. You mentioned it was just you and your colleague. So starting small, the philosophy behind that. What did the practice look like? The opening of JBL New York City, what did that look like staff-wise?
Well, it wasn't called JBL New York City, but I had my name on the front
Yeah.
of the building, which is the name that's still there, but we ended up calling it that, my initials. You know, we grew. You know, it was just me and a hygienist. My assistant was with me since I was up in Westchester. We had a small team. I always had a ceramist and a laboratory technician with me. I pulled that from those first 4 or 5 years, because to work with a commercial lab, it's a different level. And my mindset was, how do I be the best? How do I be the best at what I do? And we started, you know, slow and started to grow. And I was fairly full time, but I was also lecturing at the same time. You know, so I got out of the program. I'm about 31, 32, and I just started.
Yeah.
Right? I'm finally out of my PG practice. I remember 4 or 5 years I was working with a group where I had those very early formative years. But I started growing, and then I had another hygienist, and then I brought in a young associate, and I started to develop to what we have now, which is about 29 people, 2 labs, 4 ceramists, 4 hygienists, all specialists, a couple of restorative docs. But you know, just an amazing team. Some people we've been together 25, 27 years, and other people 10 years. And
Amazing.
you know, I love it. I still work 7, 8 days a month, the same way I've worked for 23 years. I work 2 days a week clinically, you know, because what we do is fairly intense, but you build a team.
Yeah.
It's the only way you can be successful in whatever you do. You can't do things alone. You have to have that culture build where people feel they're inspired. You know, we got to fill each other up. There's 2 options. We take the air out of a person, or you fill them up. That's the options we got.
Yeah.
And it has a lot to do with the person at the top, the leadership style, to build that culture. You know, because I can't underscore that enough, because I learned that.
Yeah.
I learned that, you know, 25 years ago, I wasn't the way I am now. I mean, we grow and we learn. And if you're open-minded, you're growing, you're learning all along the journey, which is what really keeps it fresh and exciting. And people say, you still practice dentistry? I have my buddies. And I go, I love it. I love it. You know, it's all about the power of the smile and creating beautiful smiles. Today we have unbelievable technology.
Yeah.
We take scans of the face 3-dimensionally. We scan the mouth. We design on computers. We 3D print the design. We mock it up in the mouth.
Wow.
We scan it. We CAD cam it. So CAD camming, you know, you go from a block and then you layer ceramics versus a technician just sitting and waxing from their imagination of what things should look like. Now we biocopy teeth.
Wow.
And we design it, and we see what it looks like. If your dad had a reconstruction and 30 years later it didn't look great, and he loved your smile, your brother's smile, we could scan it and biocopy it, and we do call it the smile donator technique, and we show you what it looks like having Cam's smile in Dad's mouth.
Wow.
You know, that kind of thing. So, yeah, you know, but that's called the digital workflow and flow. And what has happened in all of healthcare is that, you know, innovation and comp science and all of the technology and the great scientific research is growing so fast, so exponential healthcare, that if you embrace it, it's just changing everything we do, as evidenced by, you know, how we all got out of COVID and how science was so able to create a vaccine so quickly that we can sit here without masks on and we can enjoy our lives. But you can't say enough about that. In dentistry, where it's 15 years to adopt a new technology, it's so slow, but it's changing.
Yeah.
You know, medicine's better because they got healthcare systems, but healthcare has its own issue. You know, healthcare is 20% growing of the GDP. 20% of our country's GDP is healthcare. It's the most inefficient business model on the planet, and that needs to change because we have a sickness model. We only react to sickness, and we have, you know, every 37 seconds a person dies of cardiovascular disease. So one of my soapboxes that I'm standing on, finishing a book right now, is dentistry could be the tip of the spear for healthcare, for diagnostics on biomarkers and C-reactive proteins, all these molecules that are in saliva to detect these early changes of our body, because when you have inflammation in the mouth, it shows up in inflammation of the rest of the body and in the saliva. And so there's a lot of that going on. And one day, dentistry might actually talk to medicine and be part of medicine, and medicine might actually be part of dentistry. But that's another story why that's like that.
Certainly. So you mentioned the innovation importance in the practice.
Yes.
Whether you're retaining a customer or retaining a patient, businesses have to keep up with the innovation, practices have to keep up with the innovation. How important is that aspect and that principle of retaining and holding that innovation in your practice for the success and longevity of your business?
Yeah. You know, I want to extrapolate that question to the greater business world.
Mm-hmm.
If companies and practices and healthcare and dentistry and medicine don't constantly focus on reinvention and don't constantly focus on embracing new technology, there's a stagnation. And that stagnation turns into either you didn't differentiate yourself enough to be successful, and you missed out on an opportunity to help and to be part of the greater good. So the dental practices, like the medical systems, like a Mayo Clinic, like a Cleveland Clinic, like a Hopkins that has a chief innovation officer that focuses on that, those are the ones that will innovate. And what do we mean by innovate? You can innovate with technology and new scans and low rad scans, and you could innovate in a business model.
Mm-hmm.
So innovation and the creative optimistic mindset needs to be at the top. And when I say the top, needs to be at the leadership level that's creating the culture that people are inspired to be able to go.
Mm.
The problem that we have, unfortunately, is it's back to a command and control thinking, is that you're going to do it because I told you to do it this way. And unfortunately, that's pervasive in corporate America, and that needs to change. And it's like that, of course, in the small businesses like dental practices, because you got the doc and he's telling people what to do. The problem is you got staff turnover, you don't have the happiness quotient that you could really have, you don't have the human resource positivity that you could have, and it's a missing out of building a high performance culture, one of optimism and creativity.
A piece of that optimism and innovation in your personal life is glow science, as we know. I'm fascinated by this story, the device creation. You're innovating the whitening spectrum of dentistry. If you can, share the genesis of glow science and that whitening device and how that, going back to your athletics, how that kind of correlates together.
Yeah, so, I mean, go back to the athletics where, you know, you kind of heard the whole thinking about building that spirit of, you know, loving your teammates and making them the best they can be. But, you know, for me, fairly soon, right out of the gate, I would say I was practicing about 8-10 years. I'm starting to think about beyond some other things. And it dawned on me to invent a product. And that was the genesis of the first company called Go Smile. And we developed this whitening delivery system. But it was more than the invention. My brilliant wife, whose birthday is today, and if I don't get home, I'm going to be in the doghouse. But she had this idea. She said, you know, Johnny, let's take oral care out of the drugstore. Let's go put it into Prestige Beauty. And what means Prestige Beauty is the Nordstroms, the Saks Fifth Avenue, the Sephora beauty shops of the world. And sure enough, we did it. And we did it really well. What we didn't do well, which is going to get me on another conversation, is that the person who I allowed to invest in the company, I didn't do enough due diligence. I didn't dig in deep enough, because what happens to build a company and to do anything successful, whether it's a healthcare practice, a medicine practice, a small business, and you want to grow it, it's all about the who. Who you put on your right and who you put on your left. Who are the people you're bringing into your world? The capital partners, for anybody who's thinking about starting businesses, is so critical, because they're either going to be aligned with your thinking, aligned on your vision, and your core values, what's important for you. Integrity, honesty, where you can build that depth of trust. Well, I didn't do a very good job in that department, and I didn't pick a good PE partner. And unfortunately, with that company, I wanted to buy him out, he reneged, and then I ended up, he bought me out. And I had a very short non-compete because he did a couple of shenanigans that we had to spank him a little bit, but I was okay. But when I moved on, I came up with this idea. And what Ghost Smile was a little whitener in a vacuum-sealed ampule that stabilized. Hydrogen peroxide is very unstable. You need a vacuum seal on it. In other words, it's hermetically sealed. The big idea I had, and I'm riding my bike, and where am I? I get off the bike, and you know when you're working out and you're running or you're doing something and you're kind of free thinking. I think it's some of the most creative moments we have. And I came up with this, it just hit me that the compromises that existed with whitening, with professional lights that got too hot, and teeth got super sensitive. And tray and gels where the gel goes all over the place and it's messy and a lot of sensitivity. I said, if you put those two worlds together, close the system, put the light and heat into the mouthpiece, we can come up with something that's going to be low sensitivity, very efficacious. And sure enough, that's what happened. 24 patents later, we have a delivery system that's for whitening, and also we realized we built a delivery system for amplifying even therapeutic products that control inflammation. And that's the genesis of our Go Smile, a Glow Science company. And our Glow Science company, now we're 10 years into it.
Yeah.
We're in about 5,000 dental practices, and we also sell to the consumers. And so it's back to the old story: is when you start is not where you end up.
Of course. You mentioned it's in the dental practices, and I know JBL has it in the practice. What was this your first product that you created that you actually inherited and brought into the practice, realizing that you can use this on your patients here in practice, they can take the product home? Was this the first product?
Well, the first one was Ghost Smiles, was this little ampule.
Yeah.
And that we developed. The electronics and the delivery system really was developed in the practice where I was working with a product development company. And my hygienist came running up to me and says, you're getting the exact same results as you get with these big lights. One of the companies called Zoom, but in 1/3 the time and no sensitivity. So everything got tested and gets tested. All the ideas. It's like a laboratory, the practice. And I have these amazing patients, and they allow me to, play doctor, and they're a bunch of guinea pigs. But nothing too crazy. But I get the most amazing feedback.
Yeah.
It's like living in one of these testing labs where you're also practicing clinical dentistry. So all the way from a flavor of a toothpaste to a flavor of a whitening gel to a medical device that's either working on anti-inflammatory properties. Half the country over the age of 65, well, adults, 70% have gingivitis. And 70% over the age of 65 has periodontal disease. But 1 out of 2 Americans have some form of perio disease, which is a chronic inflammatory disease. So when you couple the facts of you got people who, and you can't feel a problem. You got to really be into a dental office to make sure your mouth's healthy. And so you have that data point of 1 out of 2 Americans with periodontal disease, and you got this cardiovascular disease, that is taking over healthcare expense, and every 37 seconds somebody passing away, unfortunately, from it. You put those two facts together, you realize how important dentistry needs to be part of medicine, and vice versa. But the Glow Science company was the first time that we really did a medical device in the practice, that we got our feedback. And I always do my preclinicals in the office. In other words, we do some studies, but they're not independent, double-blind, and then we go to research universities to get our science and our research. In Glow Science, we never launch a product unless we have the research and the science behind it.
So the product Glow Science, you have very quick results within minutes. So a patient can be in the practice, test the product, and they can see rapid results. And the word I hear you resonate all the time is wow. It's the patient wow. That's the word you look for that you've reached success as a doctor. So just as Glow Science, the product within minutes, you can transform smiles from A to B. And that's the exact word you look for. So I'm curious, explain just that wow in the practice. I know you stress on that a lot.
Yeah. The wow is the emotion. So what we talk about a lot in dentistry today is creating emotional dentistry, where you're exciting the patient. And what has happened the last, I started 3 decades ago with aesthetic dentistry and transforming smiles. But it's really not till the last kind of 15 years, 10 years, is it really become a mainstay in most of the practices. The key is to be able to show the patient what that looks like. And we have a whole technique when we're doing smile transformations to videotaping the patient and showing the patient. And we want to get them to wow, that's emotional side. Whitening is just a beautiful technique because everybody wants to have lighter teeth. It becomes more youthful. You have more confidence in your smile. It's just so easy. And with our technology, literally in 2 8-minute applications, you can move 5 shades. So it becomes part of the hygiene service, you know, the whitening. And you look for that emotional dentistry, because the beauty is, if you can lead with the emotional dentistry, then people are motivated to take care of the health.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it doesn't work the other way around. So the health and all of the deep dive, and we do it in our office, and I'm looking to try to elevate our profession. The hygiene room is critical, because that's where we can connect the dots between dentistry and medicine. We're now very involved with sleep and airway, because we have CAT scans in our dental office called cone beam, CBCTs. We're able to see anatomical structures. A lot of people have problems with breathing. They're on CPAP machines. They don't get into deep sleep in dentistry. That's becoming a very important part of our diagnostics, because we have appliances that actually work a lot better than CPAPs. And so, you know, there's this connectivity that's starting to happen between the disciplines because of innovation.
Of course.
Yeah.
So just as a business has a customer, they're pleased with a service or a product, I'm curious, as we move into the Glow Good Foundation, that wow factor plays a big role, not just in the practice, but you're transforming lives overseas. One of your patients, Lenny Kravitz, this is the genesis of Glow Good Foundation. If you could share, what has that experience been like, shaping your profession today? You're seeing yourself transform these smiles, bringing that back to the United States. And what was just the inspiration behind Glow Good Foundation?
Yeah. So we came off of Go Smile, sold that. About a year and a half, 2 years later, I was able to go on a mission to Kigali, to Rwanda, with the Foundation Rwanda people who created this amazing foundation. If all of you remember what happened in Rwanda, 900,000 people got macheted to death in 90 days because the Hutus rose up against the Tutsis. And it was a lot of outside interference with different countries that created this, it basically was like a sociology experiment, and it was very sad. And I was able to go there at a time where the country was rebuilding itself, reconciling, because neighbors were killing each other. And I met this woman named Agath who was raped, and she survived, and had her front teeth knocked out from the butt end of a machete. And they asked me, could we help her? Because we went on the mission just to see what was the oral health there and how can we help. That's when we just started the company Glow Science. And when we started this company Glow Science, we wanted to have our own foundation. In Go Smile, we were working with other foundations. So we started the Glow Good Foundation. I went over with my wife and friends of mine and Foundation Rwanda people. And I said, well, I can't help her now, but I'll come back in a year with a team. So I met Agath, and they sent me a simple alginate, which is an impression. And in my clinic, in the office, the team, we built a prosthesis. A year later, I come back. I go to the 6 dental offices for something like 12 million people, and mostly for the expats. And but the country was rebuilding. It was under the leadership of Paul Kagame, who's still the president, which is very positive. But anyway, we were in this small little dental room. I'm there with some docs, my wife, my son, People Foundation Rwanda. And as I placed this prosthesis in her mouth and looking at her, and I'm looking at those pictures, she looks in the mirror. She starts to smile. The woman has always covered her face for 17 years. And she starts to sing a Rwandan song. And when she starts to sing the Rwandan song and the look at her face, you realize that not only did you give her smile back, but we brought back her soul. And there's pictures after it, and she's all lit up, and she goes back to her town, and we gave her all this product, and she became like the oral health expert on Lake Kivu. But I came back to the practice, told my team gets all excited. My hygienist comes running up to me, and was like all excited, and Lenny Kravitz happens to be in the treatment room, and we have amazing patients in the practice, and Lenny corners me and he says, Doc, you got to help my people. I said, you got to help my people. Now I knew he was half Jewish and half Bahamian. I go, where am I going? I don't know if I'm going to Israel. I don't know if I'm going to the Bahamas. Where am I going? He goes, no, you got to go to the Bahamas, an island, Eleuthera. I go, Eleuthera? Where's Eleuthera? He says, it's in the Bahamas, and the poor side of the island, people have no access to care. They die from a bee sting. They're on a modern diet. They have so much pain. They think walking around with pain in their mouth is normal. You got to come down. So I go down there. And sure enough, I got my loops and I got my glasses, and Lenny, you know, my my wife always says, you and Lenny get along so well because he thinks he's a dentist and you think you're a rock star. So, you know, he's taking notes. He goes, Doc, how about that one? And anyway, long story short is we go back about 60 days later with my full team, 25 people. That was 8 years ago. And then last time right before COVID, we had 110 people go down there. We're in the schools. People come from all over the Bahamas. But, and it's, of all the things I do, period, the most personally enjoyable and the greatest feeling I have is helping people. And helping people who don't expect it, and helping people who think, you know, nobody cares about them. And we've been able to make a very good impact on the overall health because of that connection of oral health and overall health, and they're, you know, that they know that we're coming back. We're coming back every year. But an interesting thing happened in our second year is my sons, who one was private equity, growing up in that as an analyst, and one was digital strategy, comes running up to me one day. And they go, Dad, we can't believe what your team does. You're changing people's lives. It's so impressive. So we want to start a company all about the power of the smile. I look at them and go, really? I go, you millennials, you're geniuses. You figured out how to go into the family business without going to 7 extra years of school. So I say, all right, what's your first product? They go, toothpaste. Toothpaste. You're going to go against Colgate and Crest and GSK, and they spend millions of dollars every year in advertising. Dad, we got some ideas. I didn't want to quelch their enthusiasm. I said, okay, let's go. So they just launched in Target 2.5 years later. Lenny Kravitz is their partner. It's called Twice, big yellow tubes, and they're on it. They're excited about it. And they've been, you know, bootstrapped and struggling for 2.5 years, which is the way to start a company because you really learn how to be uber resourceful. And they got a whole new product line. And, you know, another wonderful positive thing. Every time we sit to dinner with the family, the only thing we talk about is Twice, their company, Twice toothpaste. Okay, what's the next product? You know, so, family affair.
Amazing. Well, as we wrap up, it's the beautiful part about your profession is that transformative piece. And to the attendants or the audience here, if you saw Twice actually in the lobby, Dr. Levine formulated Twice. So you can all have Twice toothpaste out in the lobby. It's there for free.
All right.
It's a new rebrand as well. So Dr. Levine, again, thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Perfect.